My friend's sister lied and said I got her pregnant. My parents cut me off over it. And now that the truth's finally out, they're the ones begging me to come back. Alright, so let me lay it all out. About a year ago, my whole world flipped upside down, and honestly, I've been carrying this weight for way too long. Never thought I'd be the type to post something like this online, but here I am. I guess that's what happens when your own family turns against you and you're left staring at the wreckage wondering, how the hell did I end up here? Anyway, let me rewind and take it from the top because trust me, this story's got the kind of twists that make you shake your head in disbelief. So, my buddy Logan has a younger sister named Aubrey. I've known them both since we were kids. Grew up in the same neighborhood, saw each other around, nothing intense, just the usual, you know? Aubrey always stood out, though, not in a bad way, just different. And look, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but she had some mental health stuff going on. I was never fully in the loop about it, and honestly, I didn't think it was my place to dig. Logan didn't talk about it much, and I didn't press. But it was kind of an open secret in our circle. Everyone knew Aubrey had her own struggles. So, out of nowhere, about a year back, Aubrey reaches out to me. Says she's pregnant. I mean, alright, that's a big deal. But then she drops a bomb. She claims I'm the father. And I swear to you, my mind just went completely blank. I sat there, stunned, like, what? Are you serious right now? Let me be absolutely clear, I have never so much as hugged Aubrey, let alone anything remotely romantic or intimate. There was nothing, zero between us. So for her to come at me with this wild claim? I couldn't even wrap my head around it. I told her straight up, Aubrey, I don't know what you're talking about, but there is no possible way I'm the dad. We've never even been like that. But she just kept insisting, repeating it over and over like if she said it enough, I'd suddenly remember something that never happened. It was surreal. I tried to keep my cool, thinking maybe it was related to whatever she'd been going through mentally, but I was freaking out inside. And this is when everything really started to spiral. She flat out refused to take a prenatal paternity test. I was sitting there thinking, if you're so sure it's mine, wouldn't you want proof? Wouldn't that settle everything? But no, she wouldn't even consider it. Instead, she started tossing out guilt like candy. You should be here for your child, she'd say. You're abandoning us before the baby's even born. It was emotional manipulation, plain and simple, and I wasn't falling for it. I told her straight up that I wasn't signing anything unless she took that test. I wasn't about to be legally tied to a kid that wasn't mine. I figured that would be the end of it. Yeah, I was wrong. Big time. A couple weeks later, my parents found out. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my folks, but they've always been old school, super into this whole family honor and taking responsibility thing. So the second they heard about the situation, they lost it. They blew up on me. Called me every name in the book, said I was a coward, a deadbeat, a disgrace. I tried to speak up to tell them what really happened, but they just shouted over me. I said, Mom, Dad, she's lying. This baby isn't mine. She's making it up. But they wouldn't hear it. It was like once they decided I was the father, nothing could change their minds. We got into some nasty arguments after that. Words were exchanged that I don't think can ever be taken back. They kept hammering on me to man up, to do the right thing, even though I kept telling them they had it all wrong. None of it mattered to them. In their eyes, I was already guilty. They told me they didn't raise a deadbeat and they were ashamed of me for turning my back on what they believed was my own child. But here's where it goes completely off the rails. When Aubrey would have gotten pregnant, I wasn't even in the same state. I was out of town for work that entire month. She was actually staying with a friend when this supposedly happened. I brought that up to my parents, thinking this'll clear things up. But they just waved it off. People make mistakes, they said. Yeah? Well, this wasn't a little oops. This was a full-on false accusation that could have destroyed my entire life. 7 months into her pregnancy, and by that point, my entire family had turned their backs on me. Every single conversation was just them pushing me to step up and take care of this kid. It was like I was living in some twisted version of reality where facts didn't matter and I was just shouting into the void. My friends mostly stuck with me. Thank God for that. But even a couple of them started looking at me sideways, asking, Are you absolutely sure, man? Maybe something happened and you forgot. Then my parents dropped the hammer. They gave me an ultimatum. Either play the role of father or get cut off completely. At first, I thought they were just trying to scare me. But they were serious. Dead serious. They told me if I didn't take responsibility, I was no longer part of the family. And when I stood my ground and said no, they followed through. They disowned me. And I won't lie, that broke something in me. I was angry. I was heartbroken. And I was stunned. These were the people who raised me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And they didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt. They kicked me to the curb like I didn't matter. It was one of the darkest times in my life. Then the baby was born, and things somehow got even more surreal. My mom actually showed up at the hospital, smiling and cooing like she was the world's proudest grandma. I didn't even know until someone else told me. Meanwhile, Aubrey still refused to take the paternity test, so I had to get lawyers involved and go through the legal process just to make it happen. And when the results finally came back, 0% chance I was the father. Not even close. And in that moment, holding that paper in my hands, I felt this weird mix of pure relief and red-hot rage. I sent the results to my parents. I figured this would be the wake-up call. I thought they'd finally see I was telling the truth all along, that they'd apologize and things might go back to how they were. Nope. Instead, they started flooding me with messages, apologies, offers of money, pleading for forgiveness. My dad even mailed me a few $100, like that was supposed to make up for everything. And yeah, I kept the money. Damn right I did. I figured they owed me at least that much for the hell they put me through. But forgiveness? No, I couldn't go there. I told them flat out, if they could throw me away that fast over a lie, then I wasn't about to risk getting stabbed in the back again. Some of my friends, and even my therapist, started saying things like, maybe you should give them another chance. They're still your parents. And look, I get it. I really do. But how do you just forgive the people who were so quick to believe a stranger over their own son? How do you trust that again? So that's where I'm at. Caught between knowing I did nothing wrong and wondering if rebuilding those bridges is even worth it. But every time I think about reaching out, I remember how fast they turned on me and how badly they let me down when I needed them most. So, after all the chaos with my parents and Aubrey's whole fake baby saga, you'd think things would finally settle down, right? Yeah, no. Life had other ideas. If anything, the drama just kept snowballing. You'd figure once the DNA test came back and cleared me, that would be the end of it. I sure hoped it would be. But nah, it wasn't that simple. Turns out, when people don't want to own up to their screw-ups, they'll bend reality however they can just to dodge the blame. When the paternity results officially said I wasn't the father, I really believed that was my moment of peace. I thought, okay, this is it. My parents will see the truth and maybe, just maybe, we can fix things. But instead of the closure I was hoping for, things got a whole lot messier. Aubrey absolutely lost her mind. She started running around town, telling anyone who'd listen that the test was a lie. Swore I'd somehow forged the results or rigged the whole thing. I wish I was kidding. Like what? Me? Some random average guy suddenly masterminding DNA fraud? Come on. I wouldn't even know where to start if I wanted to fake that kind of thing. But Aubrey didn't care. She was locked into her own version of the story, and in her version I was the villain. She told people I'd abandoned her and the baby, said I'd manipulated everyone into believing a lie. It didn't make sense, but honestly, that didn't even matter. People started to buy it. And if you've ever lived in a small town, you know how fast a rumor can spread. Pretty soon, I couldn't even run errands without someone shooting me a dirty look. At the gas station, the grocery store. Heck, I had folks I barely knew walking up to me asking why I wasn't stepping up to raise my kid. I had proof in black and white that the baby wasn't mine, but nobody seemed to care. Aubrey played the heartbroken single mom card like a pro, and I ended up being painted as the heartless jerk who ran out on her. I've never felt more powerless. When your own family turns on you, it's devastating. But when the whole community starts believing the worst about you, that's a whole different kind of pain. And my parents? They tried to act like they wanted to make things right, but the way they went about it was all wrong. My mom kept leaving me these long, weepy voicemails about how she just wanted her family back. Not once did she mention what actually happened, no apology, no owning up to how they treated me. She just kept talking like we could brush it all under the rug and pretend none of it ever happened. She even invited me over for dinner, like sharing a meal was gonna magically erase all the damage they'd done. It wasn't just tone-deaf, it felt like a slap in the face. After everything I went through, they thought a few hugs and some awkward small talk would patch everything up. No recognition of how deeply they'd hurt me. No accountability. Just let's move on and hope I play along. But trust doesn't work like that. Once it's broken like that, you don't get to glue it back together with pot roast and forced smiles. You've got to do the work. and they weren't even willing to admit they'd messed up. Then came the real kicker. My dad tried to buy his way back in. He actually sent me an email offering to buy me a new car if I'd come back to the family. A car? Like that would fix anything. I sat there staring at the screen, wondering if I was being pranked. But nope, he was dead serious. I didn't even reply. I couldn't. What do you even say to something like that? It just drove home how clueless they were about what they'd actually done. They didn't want to rebuild trust, they wanted to skip the hard part and get me back because it was easier for them that way. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Aubrey decided to drag more people into her mess. She started reaching out to folks I hadn't talked to in years. Friends, acquaintances, anyone she thought might believe her version of the story. She even contacted my ex, Isabel. Izzy and I hadn't spoken in ages, so when I suddenly got a text from her saying, "We need to talk," I had no idea what was going on. Turns out Aubrey had been messaging her, trying to dig up old drama and convince her I was some deadbeat who ran out on his kid. I was stunned. I lost it. I called Aubrey and told her flat out to stop. I wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't going to sit quietly while she dragged my name through the mud and tried to pull other people into it. She just laughed and hung up on me. Like none of this meant anything to her. It was like shouting into the void. Nothing I said got through. She was living in a fantasy where she was the hero and I was the villain, and no amount of facts was going to change that. At that point, I seriously started considering legal action. I didn't want to go there, but she was tearing my life apart. My reputation was in the gutter, my parents were enabling her, and I felt like I was completely alone in the fight. Sure, my closest friends still had my back, but even they didn't fully understand how deep this mess went. Eventually, I had to make a choice. I couldn't live like that, always waiting for the next lie, the next rumor, the next ambush. So I made the hardest decision of all. I cut everyone off. Aubrey, my parents, the whole toxic mess. It wasn't easy. It hurt like hell. But I knew if I didn't draw a line, they'd keep dragging me down. I wrote my parents a long, brutally honest email. I laid everything out, how betrayed I felt, how much they'd hurt me, how I couldn't trust them anymore. I didn't hold back. I told them straight up that I wasn't ready to forgive them. I didn't know if I ever would be. And if they ever wanted a shot at rebuilding anything, it would have to start with a real apology and them owning up to their actions. No more pretending. No more brushing things under the rug. As for Aubrey, I blocked her on everything. I couldn't take it anymore, her lies, her manipulation, the chaos she brought into my life. I cut the cord completely. Even had to talk to Logan, her brother and my longtime friend, and let him know I couldn't be around his family anymore. That part stung. Logan's a good guy, but I had to look out for myself. It's been a few months since I walked away, and to be honest, it's been a relief. Sure, there are still days when I feel guilty or start second-guessing myself. But more often than not, I wake up feeling lighter. Like I can finally breathe again. And yeah, it's messy and complicated and far from perfect, but at least now I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder waiting for the next disaster to hit. If you'd told me a year ago this is where I'd be, I wouldn't have believed it. Life's got a strange sense of humor sometimes. Just when you think the storm has passed, it finds a new way to stir things up. Update 1. So here's where things took an even weirder turn. After cutting ties with Aubrey and my parents, I really thought the chaos would die down. I figured once I removed that toxicity from my life, I could finally start healing and moving forward. But nah, turns out cutting them off wasn't the end of the madness. It was the beginning of a whole new brand of crazy. A couple of weeks after I hit send on that email to my parents and blocked Aubrey from everything, I get a message out of the blue. It was from Derek, an old high school friend I hadn't talked to in years. At first, I thought, random. But then he hit me with, "Hey man, are you okay?" That's when alarm bells started going off. Apparently, my parents had been reaching out to people, random people, trying to get them to contact me on their behalf. And not just mutual friends. I'm talking distant relatives, old classmates, people I barely interacted with back in the day. It was wild. And they weren't just saying they missed me. They were painting a picture like I was falling apart. Telling folks I was unstable, lost, not in my right mind. Like I was the one who needed to apologize and make things right. They spun the whole thing around like I was the problem for going no contact. Derek, thankfully, saw through it. He reached out just to let me know what was going on. He figured something was off and wanted to give me a heads up. I appreciated that, but sadly, it didn't stop there. Over the next few days, my phone started lighting up with messages from people I hadn't heard from in forever. Some I'd only met once or twice. And they were all saying the same thing in one form or another: your parents are really worried, or maybe you should give them another chance. It was unreal. They basically launched a smear campaign, trying to make me look like the unstable one while they played the concerned, heartbroken parents. I couldn't believe it. I was just trying to put the past behind me, and here they were, dragging everyone they could into their drama. It felt like I was living in some bizarre, alternate universe. No matter how hard I tried to walk away, the mess kept finding new ways to pull me back in. But the moment that really pushed me over the edge? That came when they contacted my boss. Yeah, my freaking boss. I still have no idea how they got his number, but they did. And they actually called my workplace to tell him they were worried about me. That I wasn't in a good mental place. That maybe he should keep an eye on me. Can you even imagine how mortifying that was? One day, I get called into the office and my boss is sitting there with this serious look on his face, asking if everything at home is okay. I just sat there stunned. For a solid few seconds, I didn't even know what to say. Like, how do you even begin to explain something like that? Once I collected myself, I laid it all out, told him the truth about what had been going on with my parents, the false accusations, the restraining order I was in the process of getting. Thankfully, he was understanding. He even apologized for bringing it up. But still, damage done. My own parents had stooped so low that they were now messing with my job, my career. All because I wouldn't cave and come crawling back. That was the final straw. I didn't want to do it. I really didn't. But I had no choice anymore. I contacted a lawyer and started the process of filing for a restraining order. I needed to protect myself, even if it meant legally severing ties with the people who raised me. It was a long and draining process, court dates, paperwork, lots of anxiety, but it was also empowering. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control. Like I was finally drawing a line in the sand. No more games. No more manipulation. No more access to my life. Of course, when they found out, all hell broke loose again. My mom sent me this long, emotionally loaded email about how she never thought her own son would treat her this way. About how family's supposed to stick together no matter what. She tried to flip the whole thing back on me, saying I was the one tearing the family apart, that I was causing all the hurt. Classic guilt trip. But I didn't bite. I didn't respond. And just when I thought things couldn't get any lower, I came home from work one day to find my car vandalized. Someone had keyed the word liar right into the side. I didn't have hard proof, but come on, who else would have done that? Hardly anyone even knew about the restraining order. Only a handful of close friends. The only people with a motive? My parents. It felt like they were losing control and lashing out in the pettiest, most destructive way they could think of. I filed a police report, of course, but nothing came of it. Just another punch to the gut. Even when you try to go the legal route to do everything right, sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most end up being the ones who hurt you the worst. After that, I started parking my car at a friend's house just to keep it out of sight. I wasn't taking any more chances. I even installed security cameras around my apartment, front door, back alley, the works. I was tired of living in fear, constantly bracing for the next ambush. I needed peace. And slowly, things did start to settle down. The restraining order finally went through. It became official. My parents couldn't come near me, my home, or my workplace. That feeling? It was like having a 100-pound weight lifted off my chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. It's been a few months since then, and I'm still picking up the pieces. I've had to have some hard conversations with coworkers and friends, explaining everything, setting the record straight. Most folks were understanding. But there were a few who gave me that skeptical look, like, you sure your parents would really do something like that? And hey, I get it. From the outside, it probably sounds crazy. But when you've lived through it, when you've seen firsthand just how far some people will go to maintain control, you stop being surprised by anything. Looking back, I never thought things would ever get this bad. I never thought my own family could turn on me like that. But I've learned something through all of this, something I'll carry for the rest of my life. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is the right thing. And sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones you have to walk away from. Because at the end of the day, you've got to live your life on your terms. Not theirs. I don't know what the future holds for me and my parents. Maybe someday they'll come around. Maybe they won't. But either way, I'm not looking back. Funny how life keeps finding new ways to throw punches even after you think the fight's over. So, after finally getting the restraining order in place and doing my best to rebuild, I figured the worst was behind me. I honestly believed I was on the upswing, starting to breathe a little easier, sleep a little better. But of course, the universe had one more curveball ready. Just when things were starting to settle down, my parents found a fresh way to mess with my life. And this time, it wasn't a phone call or an email. It wasn't vandalism or messages through third parties. No, this one hit different. I'm sitting at home, doing nothing special, just enjoying the quiet when I get a letter in the mail. At first, I didn't think much of it. Looked like some kind of legal document, so I assumed maybe it was something final from the restraining order process. I open it up, start reading, and I swear I had to double-check the sender twice. It was from a lawyer. A different one. And it wasn't about restraining orders or court protection. Nope. My own parents were suing me. You read that right? They were filing a lawsuit against their son for emotional distress. I sat there for a long while just staring at the page, trying to wrap my head around it. My parents were dragging me to court because I cut contact with them. They claimed I'd caused them severe emotional harm and that they were entitled to damages. As if that wasn't ridiculous enough, they even accused me of turning the rest of the family against them. Said I'd alienated them and destroyed relationships, which couldn't be further from the truth. They were the ones who threw me away. I was just the one who finally said enough. Part of me wanted to laugh at how absurd it was. But another part of me? I was stressed out of my mind. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was legal. This was real. I called my lawyer the second I could. She was just as stunned as I was. And she's seen her fair share of wild family cases, but this was a new one even for her. We sat down and combed through everything. While most of the claims they made were complete garbage, we couldn't ignore it. They'd gone all in, and now we had to gear up to fight back. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and stress headaches. I had to pull together everything, every email, every text, the paternity results, the restraining order, even photos of my vandalized car. My lawyer stayed confident that we'd win, but I won't lie, it felt like I was back in a nightmare. My own parents were trying to take me to court because I stood up for myself. Because I had the nerve to say, you don't get to treat me like this anymore. But, of course, it didn't stop there. They had to take it further. Suddenly, I'm getting messages from relatives I haven't talked to in years. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who didn't even know what was happening suddenly sliding into my DMs and texting me like we'd been close all along. And what were they saying? Pretty much the same thing across the board. Why can't you just talk to your parents? Family is everything. You're being selfish. It was like someone passed out scripts. They had clearly been fed a version of events where I was the cold-hearted son who turned his back on the people who raised him. And yeah, that made me furious, but also exhausted. It felt like no matter how hard I tried to protect myself, my parents found new ways to flip the story and paint me as the villain. How do you even explain to someone that your parents are suing you because you enforced healthy boundaries? You can't. Not when they've already made up their minds. So I did what I had to do. I cut even more people off. I blocked extended family, unfriended old contacts, and shut down anything that kept dragging me back into that toxic web. It wasn't because I didn't care, it was because I had to care about myself more. I couldn't keep defending myself to people who didn't actually want to hear the truth. Eventually, the court date came around. I walked into that courtroom with my lawyer ready for whatever garbage they were going to throw our way. And let me tell you, it was a show. My parents had rehearsed this tear-filled, pitiful performance. Talking about how they'd always been there for me, how they'd supported me through everything, and how I had just heartlessly cut them out without warning. They played it up like they were the victims, like I just snapped one day and turned into some cold, ungrateful monster. But my lawyer? She didn't play nice. She laid out the truth clean and clear. Brought out every bit of evidence we had. The restraining order. The harassment. The DNA test. The vandalism. Everything. And I'll tell you what, by the end of it, even the judge looked like they'd had enough of my parents' act. The lawsuit got tossed. The judge ruled in my favor and ordered them to pay my legal fees. It was a small win compared to everything they'd put me through, but at least it meant I didn't have to spend another dime fighting their nonsense. Still, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like I just survived another round in a never-ending war. After the ruling, they tried one last move. A classic from their playbook. They sent me a long, emotional letter full of apologies and regret. Said they were sorry for everything. That they wanted to make things right. That they couldn't bear the thought of losing me forever. It was every guilt trip trick in the book again. But this time, I didn't even respond. I'd made my decision a long time ago. I wasn't going back. I couldn't. There's only so much damage one person can take before they have to say, that's it. I'm done. And yeah, it still hurts. No matter how justified I feel, no matter how clear the truth is cutting off your parents, that kind of pain stays with you. But you know what hurts more? Letting their poison stay in your life. They may have called it love, but the way they treated me? That wasn't love. That was control. That was manipulation. And I'm done living under that kind of weight. So now here I am. The lawsuit's over. The restraining order is still standing. And for the first time in a long while, I feel like I've got my feet under me. I'm rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. But I'm doing it on my terms. No more bending to fit someone else's version of me. No more looking over my shoulder. I'm learning how to live in peace again, even if it means walking away from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And yeah, maybe one day they'll realize just how far they pushed me. Maybe they'll finally understand what they did. Or maybe they won't. Either way, I'm not holding my breath. I'm focused on my own life now. On the quiet. On the freedom. On the simple peace of not having their chaos following me everywhere I go. And you'd think, after all this, the madness would finally be done, right? But no. They had one last surprise left. And let me tell you, I didn't think they could stoop any lower. But somehow they did. So, a couple of months after the court sided with me and tossed out the lawsuit, things finally started to quiet down. I'd cut out the people who brought chaos into my life, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was starting to breathe freely again. No more surprise voicemails. No mysterious letters in the mail. Just calm. Or so I thought. One afternoon, I was out running some errands, nothing dramatic, just a regular day of picking up groceries, when I bumped into my cousin Tara. Now, Tara and I were never thick as thieves growing up, but we always got along fine. Through all the mess with my parents and Aubrey, she mostly stayed out of it. So when I saw her, I figured, what the heck, say hi, catch up a little. At first, the conversation was totally normal. We chatted about life, work, basic stuff. But then, just when I was letting my guard down, she hit me with, "Hey, did you hear what your parents are planning?" I stopped cold. "Planning?" I asked, feeling that old knot tighten in my stomach again. Tara hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she should even be telling me. But then she sighed and said, "They're putting together a big family reunion next month. They've been telling everyone it's supposed to be a reconciliation, like they're hoping it'll bring you back into the fold." I just stood there in disbelief. A reconciliation? I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't spoken to them. And now they were out here planning some kind of ambush reunion and telling the whole family I'd be there? Apparently, they'd invited distant relatives, family friends, people I hadn't seen in over a decade, and told them I'd be attending, like I was part of the plan. I was beyond furious. It was textbook manipulation. Make me look like the bad guy if I didn't show. Paint me as the one refusing to reconcile, all while they played the role of the loving, forgiving parents just trying to heal the family. I thanked Tara for the heads up and let her know right then and there that I wouldn't be going. She understood, but I could tell even she looked conflicted. Like she still believed the narrative that my parents were just trying to make things right. She didn't say it, but I saw it in her eyes. She wanted me to forgive them. To show up. To play along for the sake of family peace. But after everything? After the lies, the manipulation, the legal battles? There was no way I was walking into that trap. That night, I sat with it for a while. I knew I wasn't going, but I felt like I couldn't just stay silent. I needed to set the record straight once and for all. So the next morning, I sat down and wrote one final email to my parents. It wasn't long, but it was honest. Direct. I told them I knew about the reunion and that I wouldn't be attending. I made it clear I wanted no part of any forced reconciliation, especially not some public spectacle designed to corner me into making peace on their terms. If they truly wanted to repair anything, it had to start with respecting my boundaries. And until they were capable of doing that, there was nothing more to say. I didn't expect them to reply. I wasn't sending it to start a conversation. I was sending it to close the door. But surprise, surprise, they couldn't leave it alone. A few days later, my dad called. I didn't pick up, but he left this long-winded voicemail about how I was destroying the family and how this reunion was meant to be a fresh start. Then he dropped the classic guilt trip, "Your grandparents would be so disappointed in the way you're handling this." And that one hit me not because I believed it, but because it was just another reminder of how they always played this game. Every time they couldn't control me, they guilt me. Drag loved ones into the narrative. Twist things until I felt like I was the problem. Even now, they couldn't take a step back and reflect on their own actions. Instead, they fell back on their favorite play, blame me. I didn't return the call. What would have been the point? I'd already said everything I needed to say. And while I didn't respond, I'd be lying if I said it didn't weigh on me. For days afterward, I kept thinking about that reunion. About all the relatives who were going to show up expecting me to walk in and play peacemaker. I wondered how many of them had been told the full story, how many of them were getting the sugar-coated, one-sided version my parents were selling. The reunion came and went. I didn't hear a word from my parents afterward. But I did catch a few photos on Facebook, big family group shots, everyone smiling like nothing was wrong. My parents grinning ear to ear like they hadn't spent the last year trying to bulldoze my life. It was surreal, but not surprising. They'd always been good at pretending. Pretending everything was fine. Pretending they were the victims. A few weeks later, I ran into Tara again, and she filled me in on how things really went. She said the reunion had been tense. A lot of people were expecting me to show up, and when I didn't, questions started flying. And when my parents tried to explain my absence, it didn't exactly land the way they hoped. Some folks apparently started putting two and two together. Not everyone bought their story. Some even pushed back, asking why things had gotten so bad and why no one had been honest from the beginning. So yeah, maybe their narrative is finally starting to crack. And that brings me to where I am now. I've managed to pull some distance between myself and the chaos. It still lingers in the background, but it doesn't consume my every waking moment anymore. And maybe my parents will never change. Maybe they'll never take real responsibility for what they did. I've accepted that. But what I haven't accepted and won't is letting them back in to keep hurting me. I've built a wall not out of spite, but out of survival. And every day, I keep working on building a life that's mine. A life free of guilt, free of manipulation, free of walking on eggshells. Cutting off your family? It's brutal. It messes with your head. There are nights I still lie awake wondering, did I do the right thing? But deep down, I know I did. I chose myself. My mental health. My future. And if that means walking alone for a while, so be it. This story? It's messy. It's painful. And it's probably not over completely. But I'm done letting them dictate how it ends. I've got my own path now. And for the first time in years, I'm finally walking it on my own terms.